history is often written by the victors, but it is photographed by the witnesses. While our textbooks show us the triumphs, the camera captures the nightmares, from the silent screams of industrial disasters to the haunting eyes of those who saw the end of the world. These are the images that humanity tried to forget. Warning: the following images are real, graphic, and disturbing. Proceed with caution. Here are over 30 more terrifying historical photos you can't unsee. In the 1920s, these women were told they were lucky. They had high-paying jobs painting watch dials with a new magical substance, radium. They were told it was safe. So safe, they were instructed to point the brushes with their lips. They weren't just painting time, they were ingesting death. This photo shows the result of radium jaw. The radiation didn't just kill them, it caused their bones to disintegrate while they were still alive. They literally glowed in the dark as they died. This isn't just a circus act, it is an execution. In 1903, Topsy the elephant was sentenced to death for killing a spectator who had burned her trunk with a cigar. But the horror here isn't the animal, it's the audience. Thousands gathered to watch Thomas Edison's crew electrocute her with 6,600 volts, purely to prove a point about the dangers of AC electricity. The smoke you see at her feet, that is the moment the current hit. World War I introduced shrapnel on a scale never seen before, leaving thousands of men with missing faces. Before plastic surgery existed, there were the tin noses. Artists created metal masks painted to look like the soldier's former self, while intended to help them reintegrate into society. The fixed, unblinking stare of these masks often terrified their own families more than the injuries themselves. Paris, 1901. Police receive an anonymous note about a woman held captive in a wealthy neighborhood. They break into the home and find this Blanche Monnier, weighing just 55 pounds, living in her own filth. She had been locked in a pitch-black attic for 25 years by her own mother, simply for falling in love with the wrong man. Time froze for her in 1876, while the world moved on without her. February 4th, 1912, Paris. The man standing on the frozen railing of the Eiffel Tower is Franz Reichelt. He was a tailor who invented a parachute suit. He told the police he would use a dummy for the test drop, but look closely at his posture. He is hesitating. He knows something is wrong. A few seconds after this photo was taken, he jumped. The suit didn't open. It was a tragedy captured frame by frame, the Icarus of the 20th century. Hidden in plain sight during World War II was a facility that makes horror movies look tame. Unit 731. This photo shows the Japanese staff who ran the camp. They referred to their prisoners not as people but as logs. They conducted frostbite tests, vivisections without anesthesia, and weapons testing on civilians. The most terrifying part? After the war, the U.S. granted many of these scientists immunity in exchange for their data. The men in this photo didn't go to prison, they went back to practicing medicine. Found in the album of a German soldier, the back of this photo was simply labeled "The Last Jew in Vinnitsa." It captures the final second of a man's life before a mass grave in Ukraine. Look at his expression. There is no begging, no screaming, just a haunting, defiant resignation. He is kneeling on the edge of a pit filled with his neighbors and friends, staring into the lens of his executioner. The atomic bomb didn't just burn. It imprinted. This survivor of Hiroshima was wearing a kimono with a dark pattern when the bomb fell. The heat rays were absorbed by the dark fabric, burning the pattern directly into her skin, while the lighter fabric reflected the heat. It is a permanent shadow of the moment. The world changed forever. We call it PTSD today. In 1916, they called it shell shock. This famous image from the Battle of Courcelette captures a soldier who has physically survived the battle, but mentally, he is gone. The 1,000-yard stare isn't just exhaustion, it is the look of a human mind that has completely detached from reality to protect itself from the horrors it has witnessed. May 1865. This is not a man made of wax. This is a survivor of Andersonville prison. During the Civil War, 45,000 Union soldiers were packed into a camp designed for 10,000. There was no shelter, no food, just open pits and starvation. When this soldier was finally released, he was a walking skeleton, living proof of the hell on earth that was created right here in America. At first glance, this looks like a trick of the light, but look closer at his hairline. This is Robert McGee. Decades earlier, in 1864, his wagon train was attacked on the Santa Fe Trail. He was scalped by a tribal chief and left for dead in the dirt. Miraculously, the 13-year-old boy survived. He lived the rest of his life with this exposed skull, a walking, breathing reminder of how brutal the American frontier really was. In Nagasaki, people didn't just die, they evaporated. The intensity of the nuclear flash bleached the stone steps around this person, leaving a permanent shadow where their body blocked the light. This dark stain is all that remains of a human being who was standing there 1 second and gone the next. July 7th, 1865, Washington, D.C. The heat was sweltering as 4 figures stood on the gallows, their heads covered in white hoods. Among them was Mary Surratt, the first woman ever executed by the United States federal government. She was accused of conspiring to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. To this day, historians argue over her guilt. But looking at this image, the finality of the punishment is undeniable, a chilling end to the darkest chapter in American history. This isn't a war zone, it's a factory floor in New York City. On March 25, 1911, a scrap bin caught fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist factory. The workers, mostly young women, ran for the exits, only to find them locked from the outside. Management had locked the doors to prevent unauthorized breaks. In just 18 minutes, 146 people perished. The heat was so intense, it twisted these steel sewing tables like rubber bands. It remains one of the darkest stains on American industrial history. This looks like a shipwreck on the high seas, but look at the background. This is downtown Chicago, just feet from the dock. In 1915, the SS Eastland was packed with Western Electric employees heading to a company picnic, but the ship was top-heavy. Ironically, due to extra lifeboats added after the Titanic disaster, before it even left the wharf, it rolled over into the Chicago River. In just 20 feet of water, 844 people drowned, trapped inside the hull or crushed below decks. It remains the deadliest shipwreck in Great Lakes history, killing more passengers than the Titanic itself. It took only 34 seconds for the Hindenburg to turn from a marvel of engineering into an inferno. Hydrogen, highly flammable, was the only gas available to Germany at the time. The photo captures the exact moment the airship's spine snapped. The radio announcers sob, "Oh, the humanity became legendary," marking the end of the airship era forever. Long before 2020, the World War masks during the Spanish flu of 1918, which killed 50 million people, police in cities like San Francisco would shoot you if you refused to wear one. This eerie family portrait shows the desperation to survive a virus that didn't just kill the old, but turned the immune systems of the young against them. Before the vaccine, this was the reality of the polio epidemic in America. This isn't a morgue, it's a ward at Rancho Los Amigos Hospital. Each of these steel canisters, known as iron lungs, holds a living person, often a child, whose muscles were too paralyzed to breathe. They would lie here for weeks, months, or even years, seeing nothing but the mirror above their head. If the power went out, nurses had to pump the bellows by hand, or the patients would suffocate within minutes, a terrifying reminder of how fragile life was just a few decades ago. In the early hours of February 25, 1942, just months after Pearl Harbor, total panic gripped Los Angeles. Air raid sirens screamed as searchlights locked onto something hovering over the city. For an hour, U.S. artillery fired over 1,400 rounds into the sky. You can see the explosions in this photo from the LA Times. But here is the mystery. When the smoke cleared, there was no wreckage, no enemy planes, Nothing. The military claimed it was a weather balloon, but witnesses swore they saw a giant object absorbing the hits. To this day, the Battle of Los Angeles remains one of history's most public, unsolved mysteries. In Wales, a mountain of coal waste, piled too high and ignored by officials, collapsed after heavy rain. It didn't just slide, it liquefied. It slammed directly into the Pantglass Junior School, burying classrooms full of children in seconds. This photo shows the fathers, coal miners, digging through the slurry to find their own kids. 116 children died that morning. This is likely the last photo ever taken of Michael Rockefeller, the son of the vice president. He vanished off the coast of New Guinea. While the official story was drowning, he was last seen swimming toward the Asmat people, a tribe known at the time for ritualistic headhunting. Decades later, reports suggest he reached the shore, only to become a victim of a revenge cycle he didn't understand. The Winter War between Finland and the Soviet Union was psychological hell. The Finnish troops, outnumbered, used the cold as a weapon. They would take the frozen bodies of dead Soviet soldiers and prop them up in upright positions to terrify the advancing Russian troops. It was a macabre warning. This looks like a scene from centuries ago, but it was 1958 in Brussels, Belgium. A human zoo exhibit featured a Congolese village where spectators fed children through the fence like animals. It was the last human zoo in history. This is James Brock, a motel manager, pouring muriatic acid into a pool. Why? Because black protesters had jumped in to swim. The photo became a symbol of the civil rights movement, showing the visceral chemical hatred of the era. These boys aren't playing, they are breaker boys. Child laborers used to separate coal from slate. They worked 10 hours a day in total darkness. Many lost fingers or their lives before they even hit puberty. In January 1967, the space race claimed its first American lives, not in space, but on the launch pad. This is the interior of the Apollo 1 command module after a routine test turned into a nightmare. Astronauts Grissom, White, and Chaffee were sealed inside a cabin pressurized with 100% pure oxygen. A single electrical spark under a seat turned the air itself into fire instantly. The horror of this photo isn't just the destruction, it's the hatch. It was designed to seal tight, taking 90 seconds to open. The crew only had about 15 seconds of consciousness. This charred metal tomb forced NASA to completely redesign the Apollo program before reaching the moon. In 1946, at the Los Alamos Laboratory, physicist Louis Slotin was performing a dangerous experiment known as Tickling the Dragon's Tail. He was holding two halves of a beryllium sphere apart, using nothing but the tip of a flathead screwdriver. If they touched, the plutonium core inside would go critical. On May 21st, his hand slipped. The spheres closed. A blinding flash of blue light filled the room, and a wave of heat hit Slotin instantly. He jerked his hand back and flipped the sphere away, saving the lives of 7 other scientists in the room, but he knew he was already a dead man. He calmly told his colleagues, "Well, that does it." He died 9 days later from extreme radiation poisoning. In the Victorian era, photography was expensive. Often, the only time a family could afford a photo was after a death. These memento mori portraits show parents posing with their deceased children propped up to look alive, a final attempt to freeze time. We often think of hate groups as hiding in the shadows or wearing masks to conceal their identities, but this photo from August 8, 1925, reveals a terrifying reality we often forget. This is Pennsylvania Avenue. That is the U.S. Capitol, and those are 30,000 members of the KKK marching openly in broad daylight. They weren't hiding, they were parading. The horror of this image isn't violence, it's acceptance. At this moment in history, they felt comfortable enough to show their faces in the heart of the American government. It serves as a chilling reminder of how close the darkness once came to the mainstream. 9 hikers died in the Ural Mountains under mysterious circumstances. This photo shows their tent, which was cut open from the inside. They ran into the snow without shoes. To this day, we don't know what terrified them enough to choose freezing to death over staying in that tent. History is full of shadows, and we have only just scratched the surface. If you thought these were disturbing, the first part of this series covers the Francesco Frank Lentini, a famous sideshow performer known as the Three-Legged Man, and a Filipino survivor of the Battle of Manila who survived beheading. Click the video on your screen right now to see the photos that started it all. I'll see you there.